Hi everyone, I'm Pam Allenstein, Plant Collections Network Manager at the Association. The Association's Professional Citation Award recognizes the significant achievements in public horticulture of an association member who has excelled in one of the disciplines generally associated with public gardens, such as botany, horticulture, gardening, conservation, research, education, extension, development, or administration. Recipients may be at the early to midpoint of their prestigious career. More importantly, the nominee should embody great skills, innovation, and potential. Since joining UBC Botanical Garden in 2014, this year's awardee has expanded the garden's education and outreach programs exponentially, and with them, the profile of the garden. Her important work has resulted in significant garden-based programming, frequent peer-reviewed publication, and wide-reaching community engagement related to conservation of natural resources, safeguarding global biodiversity, and the preservation of human culture and knowledge at local, national, and international scales. The American Public Gardens Association is pleased to present Dr. Tara Moreau with this year's professional citation. Congratulations, Tara.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Duran, Marketing and Communications Manager at the American Public Gardens Association, and I will be your staff representative during this virtual conference session. Before we begin, here are a couple of tips to get the most out of your virtual conference experience. First, if you are experiencing poor video or audio quality, we suggest closing other programs on your computer, especially other browser tabs. Your inbox will still be there by the end of the session, I promise. If you have any other problems or questions, association staff are available to help. Give us a call at 610-708-3010 or send us an email at info@publicgardens.org. Second, while this session has been pre-recorded, the presenters are here with us today as panelists and will be happy to take questions in the live question and answer portions of the session. At some point during this session, the presenters may activate a poll. Poll responses are anonymous, so be sure to let us know how you really feel. Finally, you can submit questions using Zoom's Q&A function that you will find in your Zoom toolbar. Questions can be submitted anonymously. You can also upvote other questions to indicate you would like to hear them answered. We will try to answer as many questions as we can during the live Q&A portion of the session. Some questions may be answered directly through the Q&A feature. Thank you, and enjoy today's session.
Hello, and welcome to Stories, Maps, and Pictures, Transforming Classic Communications via Apps and New Tech. I'm Amy McCullough from the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Austin, Texas, and you'll also be hearing from Megan Wiesbrook from the Morton Arboretum in Lisle, Illinois, and Mike Kost of Mathi Botanical Garden and Nichols Arboretum in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The three of us came together because we have all used new technologies to do things that gardens have been doing for ages, telling their stories educating their audiences, facilitating wayfinding, and offering site interpretation. So we're going to demonstrate how these platforms worked for us and talk about some of the things that we learned, and then we'll answer questions at the end. To begin, I'm going to talk about the audio tour that I built for the Wildflower Center using an app called TravelStorys. TravelStorys is a free downloadable app, and it's location aware, so it knows where you are. If you were to open the app while you were at the Wildflower Center, for instance, it would tell you that there was a tour you could listen to there. And it offers all sorts of tours, walking, driving, paddling even. We did a walking tour. And when we say it's hands-free and podcast style, it means you can start it up on your mobile device, put that device in your pocket, and then just walk around the site and listen to the tour. So you're not distracted. It's really unintrusive. So I'll tell you a little more about our specific tour. We did 10 stops, so we told 10 different stories about the Wildflower Center. We talked about things ranging from the monarch migration to native plants creating a sense of place, to our prescribed fire research. We even offered a nature meditation. And each stop was about 2 to 3 minutes, so the whole thing only takes a half hour to listen to. We kept it really centrally located, so we wanted people to be able to take the tour, do all the stops if they wanted in a visit and not have it take up too much of their time. And it was developed and produced pretty much entirely by Wildflower Center staff. So we did this with the help of TravelStorys, but we chose the topics, wrote the scripts, recorded and edited the audio all in-house. The audio was actually recorded in my office with blankets pinned to the walls for soundproofing. And I figured people would want to know how much we paid. So it was $1,500 to set it up. And then the shared production cost, meaning we did a lot of the work, TravelStorys helped, is $5,000. You can actually have them do all of the production, and then it's twice as much. And there's a yearly subscription fee of $500. And it works with GPS and something called geotagging, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. When you go to our tour, this is what the landing page looks like. So the photos and introductory text were all provided by us, and then TravelStorys builds that out. And you just click on the Explore This Tour button, and it takes you right in. It shows you a satellite view of the Wildflower Center's tour, which is really nice because it's got pathways and buildings, so it helps you orient yourself. And then each of those little dialogue bubbles shows you where there's a tour stop where you can listen and learn something about the Wildflower Center. And when you open this page, an introduction automatically plays that tells you a little bit about the Wildflower Center and how the tour works.
Welcome to the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center audio tour. This is a walking tour with 10 stops. Moving at a casual pace, it takes roughly 30 minutes to visit every stop and listen to each story. To learn more about the Wildflower Center and Lady Bird Johnson, tap the red information button in the bottom left corner of your map screen.
You can toggle between the satellite view and this basic map screen, which is not as useful for wayfinding, but it's a great display of the geotags that we used. So you can see there's circles around each tour stop, and those are ranging from 10 to 15 meters in diameter. And when you're within one of those circles, it will ping you and say, there's something to listen to here. So if you were where I was when I took this screenshot and I moved a little bit closer to that plants make the place circle, it would tell me that there was a narration that I could listen to. So let's go ahead and check out an example. This was recorded by one of our environmental designers, John Hart Asher, and it's about the Wildflower Center's architecture. This is abridged for our presentation.
Just as native plants evoke a sense of place, the buildings surrounding you express the culture and architectural style of Central Texas's early settlers. The influence of Spanish missionaries is reflected in our auditorium's large sandstone blocks and wooden beams. It can also be seen in our archways and aqueducts. The iconic observation tower was designed to evoke the watchtowers of Spanish missions. Buildings made of cut limestone, such as our Great Hall, which makes up the northern side of the courtyard, reflect the tidy, sturdy homes German immigrants built in the mid to late 19th century. Structures made of convenient, ready-made corrugated tin, such as our administration building and seed silo to the west, reflect the modernization of ranching and farming in the early 20th century. If it takes a village to make a place, in Central Texas it took several. Those characteristic communities influenced one another and emerged as something uniquely Texan. The center's architecture represents those cultural identities.
And you can see that we have a photo that accompanies the tour that makes sense with the content. And also if you flip your device to the portrait orientation, it shows a transcript. So you can read along if you want, or if you're hearing impaired, then you can read the tours also. So how did we let people know that we had this? We had a few different strategies there. We had a rat card that you can see the front and back of that we created with the TravelStorys marketing team. They do help you create some materials, but we decided that that had a little bit too much info and ended up going with much simpler signage. So the sample that just says free audio tour with the URL to download the app is more in line with the signage that we've been using lately. So we have things like that at our admissions kiosk, a big banner, posters, and we've used social media and email, of course, to spread the word about this resource. We also have little signs around the gardens, so you can see in the image on the free audio tour poster that there's a little plant stake sign. It's the same thing we use to label plants in the garden. So if you missed all of that at the entry and you were walking around and saw one of those, it would indicate to you that there was something there available for you to listen to. So how was it received? This is the analytics from our first full year of TravelStorys 2019. And you can see that it was only used by 641 people, although most of them listened to about 2/3 of the entire tour, which I felt was a nice result. And you can clearly see that we are very busy in the spring, and the bluebonnet season is when we maxed out with people taking advantage of this. So it makes sense for our location here in Texas. For 2020, the analytics that they gave us are a little bit different. And this is a look at the amount of tour views. So you can see that it's not really all that engaged with. And then all of a sudden on March 30th, we have a big spike where almost 1,000 people listened to our tours. So we were wondering what's up with that. And it's really clear that it's due to an email we sent out. So this was done during our closure for COVID-19. And I want to show you a side-by-side example of 2 emails that we sent. The first was in July of 2019. You can see that the imagery, the length of copy, it's all very similar. And the first one, we were open and we just were telling our audience, hey, we've got this new audio tour. It did all right. But then the one that we sent 2 weeks after being closed for COVID-19 had a much higher open rate, a much higher click-through rate, a lot of engagement on that email. So we saw that as a virtual tool, this was being received really well by our audience, and that when we were closed and people couldn't come and experience the Wildflower Center in person, that they were really happy to have this way to connect with us and learn a little bit more about the gardens remotely. So some things that we learned through this process, I'll start with the bad news. We were hoping that more people would listen to this, and we don't have stats to support this, but our guesses are that people are reluctant to download a new app, even if they can just do it while they're on site and then delete it when they leave. We thought that that might be a hurdle. Also, when people are walking around outdoor spaces, I think they may just want to be free and view things without any obstruction from their devices. So that may have been a little bit of a problem with engagement as well. And then it was pretty labor intensive. Doing the shared production, it took up a fair amount of our staff time deciding what to talk about, writing those scripts, doing the recording and editing, and getting all of the things to TravelStorys that they needed to build the tour for us. It was fun, to be honest, but it was a lot of work. And some pros, it's a really flexible app. So you could make any tour you wanted with this. You provide everything, where you want it to ping people, what the subjects are, who speaks, who does the recordings. So you can really make whatever you want out of it, which is wonderful. We felt like it was a really nice, unclunky way to offer interpretation. We're not filling the gardens with signs. It is hands-free, so you can start it up, play all the tours with your phone in your pocket, and it's a little bit more of a free tour experience as far as, what you're having to interact with on site. And for us, it was a relatively affordable option for doing an audio tour. So was it worth it? I think before we were closed for COVID-19, we maybe would have said we weren't sure, that we wanted to give it a little more time and maybe put a little more effort into marketing and see how it did. But now that we've had it as a virtual tool at a time when that came in very handy and offered a way for us to connect with our audience when they couldn't come to the Wildflower Center, we're thinking it was a great thing to do. And we're actually thinking about adding some tours and taking advantage of a few of the add-on features that are offered, such as translation. So with that, I will hand it over to Megan.
Okay, thank you, Amy. The two projects that I'm going to be talking about are a little bit different in that they offer some off-site engagement. They're both digital resources that we created to reach the next generation of students interested in plant science and horticulture. So they have identical audiences, and they're both intended for us to kind of widen our exposure and our reach beyond the visitorship that we have to the garden. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Planted Finding Your Roots in STEM Careers podcast. And the second project I'm going to talk about is what we call the Canopy Career Chronicles, and it's a series of 8 graphic novels, mini novels that highlight different careers and kind of journeys into plant science and horticulture. So I'll start with our podcast. So this particular project was born out of an informal focus group. We had a group of high school students on site that were participating in a field trip program highlighting some of our tree science. And when we asked them how they got their content, how they digested different forms of media, they mentioned they watched YouTube and they listened to podcasts. And so we thought, what a unique way for us to reach them if they can't come on site. A lot of these students took public transportation to school, and so that was kind of how they filled their commute, essentially. And so we developed this in 2018. We did release them in 2 series, and they're released kind of in like a binge style, where we release the bulk of them over a short period of time so that people can digest the content relatively quickly. There are about 18 episodes across the 2 seasons and over 20 guests. And like I mentioned before, the topics and themes talk about the journey into STEM, kind of the serendipitous path that many of our professionals have taken, as well as some of the diverse career opportunities in the field. We also recognize that teachers were an avenue to reach this audience. And so we developed some materials and content to supplement the podcast itself. It's very audio content. And so there's not a lot of opportunities for visuals. And so for every single episode, we have additional graphics that give life to some of the things that the researchers and professionals are talking about. And then there's also some opportunity for teachers to use that content that they're talking about in a way in their classroom. So the image all the way on the right-hand side is an image of a nerve cell. And one of our professionals was an ethnopharmacologist. And so she researches different plant botanicals and extracts that can be used to treat different diseases. She's specifically focused on Parkinson's disease and looking at different nerve cells. And so she shared with us some of her images of nerve cells before and after it's been treated with a toxin. And so students in that activity actually get to analyze those images. So it's a really unique way for them to engage in some of the content and then also reach that audience of high school students and undergraduate kind of through the avenue of teachers. They are aligned to the next generation science standards for high school students. So I'm going to quickly kind of show you what one sample page of our website looks like where all of those resources are found. So this is a sample page from one of our episodes, and it has on there both an actual link to listen to this episode, but also all the supplemental material, the lesson plans, some profiles, and then just some other videos or photos that this particular guest shared with us for us to share with the audience. In order to get this content out there, we worked with Libsyn, and that allowed us to push, that's the name of the podcast host, and that allowed us to push this content to all of the different platforms seamlessly so that it could be available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, so on and so forth. So that's the kind of hosting mechanism that we use. It's very seamless. We just uploaded our content along with the description of each episode, and it kind of seamlessly did the background technology work of getting it out onto those different platforms. This is an image of all of the downloads to date. It's a rather large graph because it spans both 2018 and 2019. Those large spikes are when we would release content. So you can see kind of early in the first couple spikes in October of 2019 and September. Those were when we released content, but we really saw an explosion in the fall of 2019, mainly because we started to do work with other, I don't want to say influencers, but other professionals who had wider networks on Twitter, and we were on other podcasts as well as hosts. And so that kind of widened our reach and our impact, and so kind of drew more attention to the podcast itself. To date, we have over 7,500 downloads and have been downloaded in all 50 states and over 51 countries. We get great positive feedback from teachers and students. We have a survey on our website that they can take, because the metrics that we get from Libsyn are really only number of downloads and where they come from. And then we've also been able to collaborate with other organizations and other groups who are interested in using the content. Dream and Green is a not-for-profit out of Miami, and they wanted to use some of the content with their teachers as part of their professional development that they use to teachers. So it's been a nice way for us to reach a whole nother group of individuals in Florida that we probably who may never be able to visit the Arboretum. And then we have a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts as well. Some of the lessons that we learned was build it with the audience. We got feedback from teachers during the process of creating this, which also drove some of the questions that we asked and how we engaged with the actual guests during the episode. We worked with the community college to do the recording. We don't have a recording studio on site, and so that was a really strategic partner. They wanted more access to have their students come on site to the Arboretum, and so we were able to work out a partnership with them where they brought more students on site, and then we were able to use the production, their production facilities to make it sound really professional, which was great. And it was we never expected it to explode the way that it did, so we were happy with how much it was able to widen our network beyond the local area that we usually reach. The second project that I'm going to talk about is our Canopy Career Chronicles. This is the same audience. It's a visual format, though it's not audio content. These are 8 mini graphic novels that students can view that talk about very much the same topic too, the different opportunities in plant science and horticulture. It starts with an online BuzzFeed style quiz. So I'm going to kind of quickly show you what that looks like. So this is that BuzzFeed style quiz that I mentioned. Students answer a series of questions on what they like to do. I like to collect data. I like to work outside. And from meh, I kind of like that, to, oh my God, that's exactly what I like to do. After they hit submit and take the quiz, it then directs them to different researchers or different opportunities that they might want to learn more about. And so they can take a look at those different novels themselves. The page is set up where you can download as a PDF, or it can be viewed right in the website. And they're very graphic in nature. They're relatively short. And most of them are between a few pages in length for to kind of tell the whole story. This one is actually set up like a blog post with people commenting on the story as it goes along. But then in addition to that, if this is something that students are interested in, it shows them, well, how else can I be, if this is a career path that I want to dive into, what can I do to kind of be more like Chloe in this instance, or to get involved in this type of STEM career. So far we've had about 4,000 page views and 80 downloads. And we also did some hard copies that could be purchased in the store. That was feedback that we got from teachers. But we've also been able to highlight it at different events. Some of the lessons that are learned, obviously we wanted this to have wider impact, and we're hoping that as time goes on, we're able to increase those downloads and widen that reach. I think establishing ownership and communication was something that we learned early on. We had a lot of different individuals working on this project, and so we really needed to make sure that people were bought in from the start. It has been, in the wake of COVID-19, it's been a nice resource to point to because it is completely accessible with us being closed. People can access this material. But it was also some of the other lessons learned. It was really important for us to make these different professionals have very diverse names, appearances, backgrounds, so that they were appealing to all our audiences. And the other lesson learned, similar to the Planted podcast, was we really wanted to build this with the audience. And that's been an important theme that has kind of been woven through the project itself. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Amy and Megan. That was great. I loved hearing about travel stories and your podcasts and your novels. Quite amazing. I want to share what we're doing at the University of Michigan Mathi Botanical Gardens in Nichols Arboretum to make our collections relevant and accessible to our audiences, and in particular to meet the academic mission of the University of Michigan. So taking our collections and making them useful for teaching and research. We're using tools that are available through Esri ArcGIS online. We're using tools such as web maps, which then get converted into web mapping applications and story maps. And we're using tools such as Survey 123 and Collector for ArcGIS to collect information about our collections. So one of the things we've done is to convert our Access database, a flat table database, to a geodatabase using ArcGIS Online. So this Living Collections database now functions a little bit like Google Maps in that you can use it on your phone or your desktop. When you're using it on your phone, you can see yourself as a blue dot moving amongst the collections. You can search, you can upload data, and you can export data. So essentially what we've done is to create a web mapping application as the user interface for our Living Collection database. So I want to take you to the website where you can actually see this, and this is public and fully accessible. Okay, so here is our Living Collections database. This is live. This is a publicly accessible user interface, essentially. And this About tab has a little information about it. You can see the 4 properties that we manage. And I'm going to zoom in. So this is a live map, and I can zoom in and out. I'm going to zoom into Nichols Arboretum, and the dots that you're seeing there are species that we've taken GPS points of. And so I can click on any one of those, and let me zoom in one more time. Here we go, and here's information. It's a red oak. It tells us the size of it, and I can zoom right through that species. So that's a quick demo of that. Then on this side of the screen, we have a number of tabs. This is a search tab, and allows us to search by species, by property, by natural community or ecosystem. I can customize a search. In other words, I can draw a circle, a polygon, and it'll tell me what's in there. I can search by accession number. And I can also turn on and off any of these layers, like our trails. You can see our trails here, and management zones. I can turn those on and off. And lastly, there is, I can zoom to any of our properties. So this is an example of how we're taking our Living Collections database and making it publicly accessible. And you can download data, you can conduct searches for particular areas. Okay, so one of the things we've done is to try to meet the academic mission of the university by working with particular courses. So there's a course at University of Michigan called Woody Plants. In other schools, sometimes it's called Dendrology. So students helped us create this application where students are able to see up to 115 different species of trees and shrubs and vines that we have growing at the Arboretum, multiple examples of each. So there's this searchable, and we've taken this application and converted it to a downloadable app for free on Google Play and the App Store. So this is our woody plant study map that we created for students in the woody plant course. There are 115 different species that students have documented in the Arboretum that are taught in this class. I think they teach a total of about 140 species in that course. And we have multiple examples of these species. So we have a total of 524 examples representing 115 different species. You can click on any one of these points. For example, here's a northern red oak that's 64 centimeters in diameter, 29 meters high, and here's a picture of that actual tree, so students know they have the right tree. Also, this particular one has poison ivy growing on it, so that is noted under the hazards, so they know they have the right tree. Students can use this also to search for the species they're interested in by the name of the species, common and Latin name, by its growth form, if they're interested in shrubs or vines or trees, by the size of the tree, and or by custom area. And again, like the previous example I showed, you can, there's a legend, but students could turn off, anything they wanted, like turn off the trails or turn on the trails. So that was an example of a web mapping application, the Woody Plants app, and where we've used it for an academic setting. And we've also created about 8 different web mapping applications and paired them with story maps for our various collections. Here's an example of our herb knot garden. We've done these for our peony garden and several other of our key collections. So again, a web map is the base of these web mapping applications. They're customizable, interactive, searchable. You can export the data, and they're very useful for interpretation. So I want to show you the story map that's paired with this web mapping application for our herb knot garden. So a story map is an interactive story. It's similar to a power presentation, but it's got an embedded web map that's scalable with photos and links. So I'm going to show you an actual story map. So here is our Alexander Hicks herb knot story map. And I'm going to walk you through this. This is the introduction. You can see it looks a lot like a PowerPoint presentation. But as you move through, it brings up a web map. And the web map, as you page through, it highlights where you are. So here we are at the entrance. You can see that in pink. And then the herb knot garden. And you move through, you can read a little bit about these various garden spaces, culinary, fragrant herbs, North American medicinals, and Mediterranean medicinals, English medicinal herbs, and Asian medicinal herbs. Any one of these polygons on this story map you click on, you can see an image, and you can use this on your phone as well. You can blow up the image. If you click on any of these points, you've got the name of the species and then a picture of the species. So you know you're actually looking at the right specimen, and links are available to relevant websites. So this was designed by a student. In fact, almost all of our apps that we've done have been put together by students. So the collection of apps we've put together into a central website that I want to show you next. So all the content, all of the apps, all of the story maps, and a lot of other data is available through our Open Data GIS Hub. This is a public website that's searchable through Google, and it's fully accessible. It's shareable and it's customizable. So I want to go to the actual hub and let you take a look at that. So here we are at the Mathi Nichols Open Data GIS Hub, and as we scroll down, we can see a series of tiles. First of all, you can search under any term you want, and it'll bring up the content related to that search term. And we've grouped the applications into story maps or apps. You can bring up images of our properties going back. These are aerial photos going back to 1937 and bring those into a GIS project, the boundaries and trails for our properties you can bring in to a GIS project. We have information on our natural areas and management associated with prescribed burns and invasive species control and shrub control. There's polygons, there's web map apps, and there's Excel files that are able to be downloaded, and regional data layers such as soils and geology. So that's our hub. There's a few other things on it. We have a featured application and access to our story maps, as I mentioned earlier. All of the applications we've made are available through this hub, as I've said, and also available through ArcGIS Online. And we've put relevant links in our website. For example, on our homepage, we have relevant links on the various collections, as well as search our collections will open up our collections database. So how is this being used and how is it being viewed? Our user statistics show that we've had 34,000 views of the collection of 30 apps. Some have been viewed quite a bit, like our woody plant study map has been viewed over 7,000 times. So that's been impressive. Lessons learned, we've realized that you need an expert, a super user. Have one of those at the Gardens, Maricela Avalos. Data curation, there's lots of data to track. Training for new users is really important. Promotion certainly helps increase use. And the user statistics have been helpful for sharing with leadership the importance of this work. And lastly, I want to thank the Institute for Museum and Library Services for providing funding for this work. Maricela Avalos has provided the technical expertise. Peter Knoop at Ellison AIT has provided guidance to Maricela and myself, and dozens of students have participated in developing these apps and story maps, and I want to thank them. So thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Hello, everybody. I am Richard Duran from the Association's Marketing and Communications Manager. I see Amy and Megan have activated their video and are ready to take some questions. We've answered a lot in the actual Q&A, and I think that it's gone very well. I think we did get to some of the questions about what sort of database programs people are using and such, but I think some of the interesting things are, there's an anonymous question. Cultural institution data keeps saying apps aren't measurably increasing visitor satisfaction. Have you done any surveying about satisfaction for visitors that use or don't use your app's digital content? Anybody?
That we haven't done any surveying of guests about whether the TravelStorys virtual tour audio tour has been able to enhance their experience. So I would love to get that kind of feedback. We haven't. We basically have just had analytics of how much it's being used on site, and can compare that to our general visitation, but we don't have any concrete direct survey feedback from guests for the app that we've used at the Wildflower Center.
So both the Planted Podcast and the Canopy Career Chronicles are not designed to be used on site. They're kind of an extension or a way to access people who aren't able to come on site. We did create some evaluation surveys in conjunction with the podcast, and then incentivized teachers or listeners to complete that survey by being entered to get a free set of headphones. And we did get some feedback on that, on the content of the podcast, the format, the length, those types of things. But I don't think that directly addresses your question, because it's more about the customer satisfaction and apps being used. But it is a component of how we evaluated that project with user feedback.
I think something that we did touch on in the actual answered questions, but also it's something that I think is very much of interest to everyone, is the time, resources, and effort that goes into actually putting this together, and then I guess the reward that you get from having it done in the first place. We did touch on that in a couple of the presentations, but if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, especially pre and post COVID-19, as Amy had mentioned in her presentation.
I can jump in with that, unless Amy, you wanted to go first. It doesn't matter.
No, I mean, basically, I don't have a whole lot more to add besides what I had mentioned in my section of the presentation, just that we had a lot more people checking out our audio tour virtually than we did actually have them checking it out on site. So I think when the Wildflower Center was closed to the public for a couple of months, we found that to be a really useful way to reach out to our audience and connect with our community and let them kind of see the Wildflower Center and learn about it from home. I think that turned out to be a really great resource for us, but it definitely felt like it was more useful during that closure than it was getting a lot of attention when we were open. So.
I can second that a bit. As far as time and resources put towards both the, well, first with the podcast project, the main resource that was put forth, that was both my time as well as Jessica Turner-Scoff, who is our co-host, because we created the content for those lessons, we practiced them with the guests and did all the coordination with our outside partner for recording, which was a lot of time up front. It's certainly been worth it. Kind of to echo a little bit of what Amy said, this was something that we were able to highlight during the period of time when we were closed. We've been able to utilize this content with our youth volunteers who usually are on site doing volunteer work on site at the Arboretum. And when we were not able to run that program in the same way this summer, that's one of their projects that they can utilize some of that content kind of following just to give access. So that's kind of the resource allocation that we had for that particular project. The Canopy Career Chronicles had a lot of review process by a lot of different experts and different people that those stories were modeled after. So there's a lot more resources poured into that project, but there's a lot, it's very individualized. And so that's a little bit of why there's more resources put into it. But again, that's been a nice resource that we've been able to highlight and give people access to when they were learning in place.
Terrific. I see another question here from Mackenzie, our wonderful vice chair of the marketing and communications community, who is with Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia, whose app I happen to have on my phone right now. But Amy, when you were going in and trying to decide what app or what, did you do any additional research into how, different app providers, or how did you land on the one that you chose?
I just replied to that particular question in the Q&A, but more generally, I actually don't know that we entertained any other apps. I could be wrong. Basically, our director of communication and the founder of TravelStorys, I know, kind of set up this project together, and then I was brought in to manage and produce it. So by the time I got involved, it was already decided that we were doing this TravelStorys audio tour. But I just put my email in the answer to that question. So if anyone wants to follow up with me, I could check with our director of communications and see if he did entertain other apps for doing an audio tour. My understanding, if I'm remembering correctly, is that Story Clark, who founded TravelStorys, I think approached us and maybe just kind of sold him on the idea of using TravelStorys. So I'm not sure that much shopping around was done, but I'm certainly happy to follow up on that if anyone wants to reach out to me directly.
Great. I think we do have another question about just how expensive this was, and I think you did touch on that in your presentation. If I'm correct, it was a $1,500 setup fee, $5,000 in production, and then what was the annual or the ongoing fee? It's
$500 a year subscription to keep it running. And I did mention this earlier, but if you feel kind of overwhelmed by the idea of doing audio production yourself, you can pay TravelStorys to do the entire thing for you, and in that case the production fee is twice as much as $10,000 instead of $5,000 for a tour of the size that we did, which is 10 tour stops. So so you can kind of decide how much you want to DIY that, and how much, if you want to, if you can afford to and you want to pay more, if you can have it be a little more hands-off.
And related to that, and I know it's something that Megan had touched on in her presentation as well, and there's also been a couple of questions in the Q&A, is in terms of integrating things with schools and local education resources. And also, I know you, Megan, mentioned you partnered with or had somebody in Florida come to you and say you want to be in charge. How do these things get integrated in wider educational facilities?
Yeah, so when we started after the project launched, one of the main places that we wanted to get it out to was within our local area and some of the local high schools and districts that we serve. We participate in an annual teacher workshop that's part of our regional office of education that's put on each winter. And so we highlighted it in that session for those grade level teachers. We gave them opportunities to do the activities. And then also we use that as an opportunity as like a mini focus group to get insight on the next season. So that was one of the ways that we initially wanted to get it integrated locally and also get the word out about the podcast right away. Later that year, we were contacted by a non-for-profit in Florida who works to create climate change programs in high schools for high school teachers. If they participate in this program, they then have to adopt so many lessons in this curriculum that are around food security or climate change or resource sustainability. And so they wanted to use 2 of our lesson plans in their high school curriculum. And actually after this recording, after we did this recording for APGA, they reached out to us to let us know how many teachers and students participated in the 2 lessons that they had used of the podcast content. And we've also seen a spike in downloads in Florida because we can do that by, we can see that by location. So that has been kind of a nice piece of impact that has kind of happened a little bit organically because they found us, but they indicated that about a little over 4,000 students were given the content itself. It's across 16 different schools in the Miami-Dade County area. So that's been kind of another way for us to see impact and metrics beyond just number of downloads.
Great, and I think that's also related to another question we have in the chat in terms of Megan, yours is pretty much a web-based thing, whereas Amy, yours would be more of a downloadable app. What are the analytics better for a downloaded app or for the website? Do you have any insight into that?
Well, I can say based on, I would say that the resources that Mike was showing from Mathi and Nichols Arboretum are also web-based, and just looking at the stats for engagement that he was sharing and also what we've heard from Megan, it seems to me like they're getting a lot more action than the TravelStorys audio tours were. We're also, I think, a much smaller garden, so there's, a little bit all relative to consider with that, but, I don't have any data saying that people didn't want to download the TravelStorys app, but we kind of speculated that maybe, adding another app to your device is something that is a little bit of a roadblock. So it seems like based on our 3 experiences that the web-based apps are getting a little bit more traction, but it's, that's sort of speculative.
Mike, do you want to add anything to that? I think you're still muted, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
I agree that with Amy that it is hard to tell and gauge. So our information is available through ArcGIS Online, and there's a large community of users internationally on ArcGIS Online. When we use ArcGIS Online to get user statistics, all we can tell is hits or views. We can't tell who or what country. But because we have this, we also have, in addition to ArcGIS Online, we have the hub, which is just off of Google. It's just a website. Now we can use Google Analytics. And on that, we can see that they come from all over the world to get there. And that's not surprising because of this international user group of ArcGIS Online. So I think a lot of people are accessing our sites who are just making other story maps and other things. And they're curious, like the herb knot garden got 3,000 hits in the first few months because I think a lot of people are interested in herbs. So so I think that just drove use. It wasn't the intended audience, right? Like we're thinking of the academic mission, we're thinking of our volunteers, but I think we're getting a lot of, if you would, press or hits or views from people all over the world that are coming to know our collections in a way we didn't necessarily intend. So just to sum up, Google Analytics can drill down and give us much more information. That's available through users from our hub, but that's only a small segment of the overall users. In fact, the hits to the hub are in like the 2,500 range versus the hits on the views on ArcGIS are at 34,000. So it's a different kind of information that we're getting in terms of our users, and I think people are accessing it differently because of that ArcGIS Online user community.
Sure. Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to put a pin in this right now. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thanks to our three presenters. That was a wonderful presentation from everyone. If we'd like to keep that discussion going, you can use the live discussions tab on the conference website and start a topic about this. And I believe our presenters will be happy to go in there and take a look. You can also reach all of them via email, and you can find most of them on their websites and also through the association as well. We'd also like to thank Lake Flato, our education and communication track sponsor, for sponsoring today's session. You can find more about them at lakeflato.com, LAKEFLATO.com. Now, please stay tuned for a couple of short announcements from the association, and we'll have some time for you to get to your 305 breakout session. And we hope to see everyone today at 4 o'clock at the Idea Cafe. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you at conference.
Good morning from the Jensen Olson Arboretum in Juneau, Alaska, on the shores of Alaska's Inside Passage.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Beck, Director of Programs and Education for the Association, and here to talk to you for a moment about the Association's Program Selection Committee. Every year, committee members work hard during the fall and winter, poring over each session submissions and making the tough decisions about which ones are going to make the cut for the annual conference. They play an enormous role in our conference experience. For this year's conference, we reviewed 141 proposals and approved 79 of them. And then we started the conference planning all over again this spring. We couldn't present every session we would have liked to. We simply didn't have time available. Some of our presenters weren't able to make the transition to an online role. Still others, unfortunately, found themselves separated from their gardens. And we also wanted to be sure that when we put together content for this virtual conference, that it would really represent the new reality in which we find ourselves, a changed world. I hope you will agree with me that they did a terrific job making this virtual conference relevant and timely. So at this time, I'd like to give a special recognition to the members of this committee and to our chair, Clayton Bass, for his and their service and dedication to their important role. From all of us here watching, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Druckenbrode, Chairman of the Council of Communities for the Association. The Association's 21 professional communities are groups of garden professionals from across the public horticulture industry. I'd like to thank all of the volunteer chairs and vice chairs of our association communities for their hard work and dedication throughout the year. The community forums on the association website are places where you can exchange ideas and information with your fellow garden professionals. Many of them have had informative town hall meetings in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, sharing experiences and best practices. Community members also get informative, targeted newsletters every month with upcoming professional development opportunities and recently added resources to the Association Library and Media Center. You will also find these when you log in onto the Association website and are directed to the member dashboard. Usually, these groups would be having their annual meetings at the conference, but this year, those meetings will be virtual and they will be taking place across July and August. If you are a member of a professional community, thank you. Be active in your community. If you're not, Please consider joining one or more of them. It's easy. Just go to the association website, publicgardens.org, and log in using your work email address. You'll find yourself on the member dashboard where you can find links to join a professional community. Enjoy.